Another mission complete.
And took off the street, locked up by the police. Lace meatball in that little crowd.
The last time we spoke and you discussed a war that was going on in the Calliope, you mentioned a group called the A-Team. So who were the members of the A-Team?
Members of the A-Team was it's quite a few of us that grew up on the what you call the front of town side of the Calliope project. The primary A-Team consisted of Gerald Sterling, Pissy Bob, which is Bobby Packnett, Milton Isaac, and Jimmy Isaac, which is Pop and Boo. Those was the primary members of the A-Team. The secondary members who weren't actually members of the A-Team, but were close associates of Gerald, was me and Meatball. Myself and Meatball, Gennaro Arthur. We all grew up together playing marbles, playing sandlot football, spitting topsoil. In other words, to say that we weren't associated doing a drug. We didn't have a drug association. We had a friendship from growing up in the Calliope housing project on the front of town side of that project.
So what message does NAP have for the Calliope? Not just your generation, but also the generations that came after you.
Yeah, it was real shocking to me, to say the least, that in 1998 I ran into a young man from the Calliope housing project named Troy L. Ross. Everybody from the Calliope knows Troy L. as Turkey. I was really surprised to see Turkey in federal prison. We were at the USP, United States Penitentiary in Beaumont, Texas. So when I seen him, I hadn't seen him since he was 14. At that point, I understood something real drastic had to change in all of us, because my first question was, Turkey, how would you wind up in prison? And he looked at me and said, "Nah, man, all I ever wanted to do is be like y'all. I wanted to make some money hustling in the project." And that was a result of me winding up coming here. That at that point, it took an effect on me, because it made me understand that everything that I was involved in, it wasn't personal anymore. It wasn't what I was doing. It was a reflection. The reflection started spreading out to other people in the project that I didn't know was actually watching what I was doing, but it affected their lives as well. So that was something I always regretted about being involved in anything to do with narcotics and the gunplay or anything else in growing up in the Calliope House project.
In response to that, I want to make a statement of my own, giving you my interpretation of everything that you just stated. Now, it's one thing to say that, yeah, I would change some things because I ended up in an unfortunate predicament, right? That's one thing. Now, it's something completely different to say, yeah, I would change some things because I realized that my actions, unbeknownst to me, may have set a bad example and may have led some people who were watching me to make some bad decisions that landed them also in an unfortunate predicament as well. Now, what that tells me is that you're not thinking selfishly, because again, anybody can say, yeah, I would change some things because I don't like how things turned out for me. That can be interpreted as selfish. But in my opinion, to say that I would change some things because my actions influence the actions of others unbeknownst to me, in my opinion, that actually shows real regret or real remorse. And that brings me to this question. If there was anything that you could change about the past and whatnot, what would that be?
This call is from a federal prison.
Basically, my core self as an individual, I had the right upbringing, even though it was part of a real poor environment. I had the foundation and the structure to succeed. I even had a good head on my shoulder. Appetite for money, it made me make a lot of poor choices and bad decisions. I can't change who my friends were, because to me, they were still good people. They just stood for the wrong things, and that also involved myself. Some of the things that the choices I made led to bad decision making. I think if I could ever change anything, I think I would have, really wanted to say that maybe I would have turned and walked away from some of the situations that occurred by saying, it's not worth it. instead, I was kind of strong. I was stern. I was stubborn. I was willing to die for what I believed in. And I think that was the wrong approach about dealing with anything I was doing in the streets. So it was, in other words, I was saying that I was kind of like an unmovable force. And I regret that aspect of it because I could have easily said no. I could have walked away. I could have stopped dealing drugs. Everything could have stopped, decision. But I didn't make that right decision.
So what I want to get into now is the part that everybody wants to know, and that is the Glenn Metz Gang. Now, pretty much everything that we've heard about the Glenn Metz Gang has come either from law enforcement, the government, or street gossip. But we haven't heard about the Glenn Metz Gang from somebody who was actually there. So, what should people know about the Glenn Metz Gang?
Okay, the Glenn Metz organization or gang was really what the government manufactured in their investigation of Glenn Metz drugs, distribution of drugs. There was no such thing as a Glenn Metz gang. Glenn Metz participated in a degree of distribution of cocaine. And in that distribution, he distributed drugs to multiple people who, over a course of time, caught their own cases. But they testified at our trial that they got their drugs from either Glenn, whether they were Colombians, they were Cubans, a guy named RICO, a guy named Ivan Gonzalez, Eliseo Melendez. These were drug dealers from foreign drug dealers, Colombians and Cubans, who testified that they supplied Glenn Metz. And others testified that they received drugs from Glenn Metz. But they identified Glenn's wife, Danielle. A couple of them identified Glenn's brother as either picking up money or something to that degree. And basically, that was what was really a drug conspiracy. The government made it into a drug gang. The reason they made it into a drug gang is because they wanted to include myself, Gerald and Elwood. They wanted to include Gennaro Meatball Arthur, and they wanted to include Marlo Helmstetter. Because of what I spoke about when I displayed document number 1 was an indictment on us 3 plus Derek Mahoney, and the Earhart Expressway shooting had actually took place in Metairie, Louisiana, right around Cleary and somewhere in that area. I can't remember exactly where that they said took place. That is the suburbs of New Orleans. That case was dismissed in the state because there was no evidence to proceed with it, to prosecute any further. So in order to bring those charges into a federal form, the government has to have jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is not ordinary in murder cases for the government unless it happens on murder. The murder happens on government property, like a post office, federal prison, something to do with the actual United States government. They just don't go out and prosecute murder cases. So in order to bring that those murders into Glenn Metz drug trial, they had to say that Glenn Metz was this drug boss in what they call a continual criminal enterprise, and they had to say that he ordered these murders some kind of way. And what I wanted to get to, if you look at the Glenn Metz, the document that I have listed as document 5, which is the indictment, and you go down to page 2, it speaks of the manner and means of how things took place in this organization. Well, right on page 2 through 4 and 5, you're gonna if you read it, any of it, you're gonna see that they allege that Glenn Metz ordered this murder of Samuel Lee Clayton, which everybody knows is Sam Scully, the same Sam Scully that I spoke about earlier, wherein I said that a war was going on in the uptown area with the Sam Scully, Gerald Sterling, which manufactured it all the way into what you call like A-Team. Well, they now allege in the federal indictment that was started by Glenn Metz having Sam Scully murdered in 1987. Now, this is the reason behind that was that, as I explained, that there was no other way to bring up those other murders in the state, because once it was dismissed in the state, it was over with. When you look at the indictment further, you're going to see that myself, Gerald Elwood, I was indicted again for the same drugs conspiracy that I was convicted for in 1991, wherein I was arrested with Rudolph Dennison, William Barnes, and Ernest Marrero leaving a Holiday Inn in La Place, Louisiana. I became the first person in the history of the entire Fifth Circuit to ever be allowed to be tried twice, which is what they call double jeopardy in the legal terms under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. You cannot be tried twice for the same offense. They made an exception for that. They wanted to make sure that they were able to bring what they were trying to bring in. The only way they can bring it in is to bring it in a federal form. So they had to allow me to be tried for the drug conspiracy again. The judge, which his name was Judge McNamara, and he was morally non-compliant with the Constitution when it came to this case. He denied us any due process. That's why he sealed all the reports where I showed you in document number 3. We had no police, no homicide detectives, no FBI, no DEA, because all of those reports helped us and showed where they investigated us, and the facts didn't include us in any shootings, murders.
This call is from a federal prison.
That they were alleged in this indictment. So therefore, the judge sealed that so we wouldn't have a defense. He wouldn't allow me to tell the jury that I'm already in prison for those 2 kilos of cocaine with the young men that I just mentioned. Therefore, it's not connected to Glenn in any way, and Glenn was not involved. If I got up on the stand, I would have to admit that I'm in jail, which would make me guilty in the Glenn Metz trial now. So I couldn't even take the stand because I don't have a way to tell the truth. So if you go to page 16 of that indictment, which is it says that the introduction of count 7 through 11, if you look at the bottom, it's going to show you where they start talking about the Sam Scully murders. The Sam Scully murder went on to page 17 through 19, where they talk about counts 9, which is the murder of Michael Wilson. Counts 10 is the murder of Donna Ellis. And count 11 is the attempt murder of a guy named Wilford Carr. They were all shot on the Elwood Expressway. The purpose of everything that the government did was to bring back those murders from Bettery to put them into Glenn Metz trial. So therefore, this is where you get the terminology of the Glenn Metz drug organization or the Glenn Metz gang. There was no Glenn Metz gang. It was a Glenn Metz conspiracy for selling drugs. It was no gang. Glenn had no voice with me. He had no dealings with Meatball. He had no dealings with Marlowe. He don't have the closest Glenn ever been to Meatball or Marlowe is when we were all going to court. That's it. On the street, they had no association, no numbers, no conversations, nothing to do with Glenn or drugs. Meatball or Marlowe were not drug dealers. I sold drugs. So this is all
This call is from a federal prison.
all government manufacturing cases, which later we would determine to be what they call alternative facts. When you look at the last page of that indictment, it's important that you remember this man's name. He's a federal prosecutor. His name was Julian Parker.
Okay.
And I want you to remember that for a reason.